Prime Derrick Rose, maybe the most explosive athlete the NBA has ever seen. Lightning quick, impossible to stay in front of. A human highlight reel with MVP hardware to prove it. In 2011, he wasn't just a star, he was the youngest MVP ever. To this day, fans look back and see a legend stolen by injuries, a guaranteed all-time great, if only his knees had held up. But what if I told you that greatness was never guaranteed? Yes, Rose was special, unstoppable in transition, fearless in the paint, and beloved by a city starving for a hero. But even without the injuries, the road ahead wasn't so clear. His game had limitations. The league was evolving, and the crown wasn't his for the taking. This is the side of prime Derrick Rose no one talks about until now. Before we can talk about Derrick Rose's prime, we have to quickly look at how he got there. After a stellar season at Memphis, Rose was taken with the first overall pick in the 2008 NBA draft by his hometown team, the Chicago Bulls, a franchise built by Michael Jordan, but lost in the wilderness ever since. The city was starving for a new hero, and now all eyes were on the 19-year-old from Englewood. In year one, Derrick Rose in many ways lived up to that high pressure. He averaged 16.8 points and 6.3 assists per game, helping lead the Bulls to a 41-41 record, an 8-win improvement from the year before. That was good enough for the 7th seed in the East. His reward, a first-round matchup against the defending champion Boston Celtics. And in Game 1, the rookie stole the show. Rose exploded for 36 points in a 105-103 overtime win, tying Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's record for the most points ever by a rookie in their playoff debut. The Bulls would go on to lose the series in 7 games, but Rose had made his statement. The next star had arrived, or at least that's how most people remember it. The truth is, while Derrick Rose was undeniably special, his game had flaws. One of the biggest, his jump shot. Despite playing point guard in a league increasingly dominated by shooting, Rose hit just 22% of his threes as a rookie, making only 0.2 per game. His high-level athleticism masked that weakness early on, but it was a crack in the foundation that couldn't be ignored. In year 2, Derrick Rose continued to rise. He averaged 20.8 points and 6 assists, shooting an efficient 48.9% from the field, a noticeable jump from his rookie season, and impressive for a 21-year-old point guard. But for all of his growth, the biggest hole in his game still lingered. His three-point shot showed almost no improvement. He shot just 26.7% from deep, again only making 0.2 threes per game. Once again, the Bulls finished 41-41 and grabbed the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. That meant a first-round matchup with the top-seeded Cleveland Cavaliers and a 25-year-old LeBron James playing some of the best basketball of his young career. Rose held his own, averaging 26.8 points and 7.2 assists in the series, but a 25-year-old LeBron overwhelmed Chicago, averaging nearly a 32-point triple-double and closing the series out in 5 games. It was another step forward for Rose, no question, but after 2 full seasons, he wasn't on some untouchable trajectory towards all-time greatness. His numbers, while impressive, weren't historically unique. And most importantly, he hadn't yet shown any signs that he could go head-to-head with LeBron, the man who stood in the way of any Eastern Conference contender. Today, people look back and assume Rose was destined to become one of the greatest ever. But at that time, he wasn't viewed that way. That narrative, that myth, wouldn't really take shape until the season that came next. Because in year 3, Derrick Rose didn't just improve, he exploded. And before we jump into that MVP season, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button. If we get to 2,000 subscribers, I'll bring back weekly uploads. Year 3 felt different from the very first tip-off. The Bulls had made big moves in the offseason, landing Carlos Boozer, Kyle Korver, and new head coach Tom Thibodeau. But while Chicago made a splash, the Miami Heat made a tidal wave, forming the big three of LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh, the Eastern Conference had officially become an arms race. Derrick Rose opened the season like a man on a mission. In Game 1, he dropped 28 points, and just 2 nights later, he lit up the Pistons for 39. After 14 games, Rose was averaging 26.6 points, 4.6 rebounds, and 8.2 assists. His playmaking had taken a noticeable leap, and a big reason was the addition of something he'd never really had before: a somewhat respectable three-point shot. Through those first 14 games, Rose was hitting 1.3 threes per game at 32.7%. Still not anywhere near elite, but good enough that defenders could no longer stag off him without paying the price. This allowed Rose to showcase his athletic ability even more. As the season went on, the Bulls built chemistry. The defense tightened under Thibodeau, and Chicago started looking like a contender again. And while Rose was clearly the engine, we can't ignore the roster around him. Luol Deng was one of the best two-way wings in the league. Carlos Boozer and Joakim Noah formed one of the top frontcourt duos in the NBA. Kyle Korver was a deadly shooter off the bench. Taj Gibson was an energy big who could change a game with hustle plays. No, they weren't a super team in the Miami Heat sense, but this was far from a one-man show. The reality is, if you replaced Rose with almost any all-star point guard from that era, this Bulls team would have still been very good, probably even great. But with Rose, I do have to admit, they had something different, something electrifying. At just 22 years old, he was about to win the MVP, and according to some, was set to be the face of the league's next generation. Still, even in the middle of that breakout, the same flaws were there. The shaky three-point shot, the questions about how his style would age, and the reality that the East still ran through LeBron. The hype was real, but so were the challenges ahead. As the season rolled on, the Bulls didn't just look good, they looked like a real title contender. The core was young, but they were winning a lot. Early in the year, they ripped off a 13-2 stretch. Not long after, they followed it up by going 11-2. During that run, they went head-to-head with the Miami Heat, and even though LeBron sat out, the Bulls sent a message with a 99-96 win behind 34 points from Derrick Rose. By the 50-game mark, Chicago was 35-15, and what started the season as a long-shot MVP bid for Rose was now looking probable. Back in October, the Bulls weren't considered the favorites. Analysts had them behind Miami, Orlando, and Boston in the East. But as the regular season neared its end, Chicago had taken the top spot in the betting odds, the favorites to win the NBA championship. For a city that had been starved of glory since the Jordan era, it felt like destiny. But in the NBA, destiny is never guaranteed. As the regular season closed, the Bulls finished with authority. They beat the Miami Heat 2 more times, sweeping them in the season series 3-0, and they claimed the best record in the entire NBA. Derrick Rose ended the year averaging 25 points, 7.7 assists, and 4.1 rebounds. At just 22 years old, he was crowned the NBA's most valuable player, the youngest in league history. Today, some debate whether Rose truly deserved the award over LeBron James, but in 2011, there was no question. LeBron had just joined forces with 2 other All-NBA talents, and the Heat were expected to dominate right away. Instead, the Bulls surpassed them in the standings, and Rose torched Miami in their head-to-head matchups, averaging 28.7 points in 3 wins. Yes, LeBron was still a better player, but in the regular season, Rose had a more impressive campaign, leading an underdog Bulls team to the top of the NBA. In that moment, the MVP was his, and no one could argue otherwise. Entering the 2011 playoffs, the Bulls were the 1 seed in the East, facing the A-seeded Indiana Pacers. In the first 2 games, Derrick Rose looked unstoppable, dropping 39 points in Game 1, then following it up with 36 in Game 2 to give Chicago a 2-0 series lead. But in Game 3, his performance dipped. Rose shot just 4 of 18 from the field, including 1 for 9 in the second half. Still, the Bulls pulled out an 88-84 win on the road, a testament to how strong the supporting cast really was. Chicago closed the series in 5 games, and while Rose's averages looked impressive at first glance, 27.6 points, 4.6 rebounds, and 6.2 assists, the efficiency told a different story. He shot just 37% from the field, 21.6% from 3, and averaged nearly 4 turnovers per game. It wasn't a superstar level playoff performance, but the Bulls still advanced with ease. In the second round, the Bulls faced the Atlanta Hawks, a team fresh off upsetting the Orlando Magic in the first round by grinding out multiple close wins. While the Hawks had proven veterans like Joe Johnson, Josh Smith, and Al Horford, Orlando's inside-out style with Dwight Howard was arguably a tougher matchup for Chicago. Still, Atlanta came out swinging. In Game 1, the Hawks shocked the Bulls 103-95, raising questions about whether they could pull off another upset. But Chicago quickly answered. They won games 2 and 3 to take a 2-1 series lead. And in that third game, Derrick Rose was on another planet, dropping 44 points on 16 of 27 shooting in one of the best performances of his career. The Hawks fought back in Game 4 to even the series. But from there, the Bulls' size and defense took over. Joakim Noah and Carlos Boozer punished Atlanta on the glass. Tom Thibodeau's defense smothered the Hawks' offense, and Rose continued to play at a superstar level. Chicago closed out games 5 and 6 to win the series 4-2, advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since 1998. The stage was now set. Number 1 seed Chicago, led by the league's youngest MVP, against the new powerhouse in the East, the Miami Heat. The year before, Derrick Rose faced LeBron James in the playoffs, and LeBron dominated that matchup. In the 2010s, the East was run by LeBron. If you couldn't beat him, you weren't making the finals. Going into the series, already 0-1 against the King in postseason battles, Rose needed to prove he could go through an all-time great player to reach the game's biggest stage. On paper, the 2011 Miami Heat were the most flawed of the Big Three Heat teams. Beyond LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, their starting lineup included Joel Anthony and a 32-year-old Mike Bibby, who would retire the next season. That didn't make them an easy out, but if you couldn't beat this version of Miami, your chances against the more polished Heat teams of 2012, 2013, and even 2014 were slim. Game 1 gave Chicago hope. The Bulls blew out Miami by 21, holding LeBron to just 15 points on 5 of 15 shooting. Rose scored 28 and looked ready for the challenge, but that was the high point. In Game 2, Miami clamped down, holding the Bulls to just 75 points. Rose shot just 7 for 23, while LeBron scored an efficient 29, stealing a road win. In Games 3 and 4, the Heat made a defensive adjustment, putting LeBron on Rose. While Rose had the speed advantage, LeBron's length and IQ allowed him to sag off, baiting Rose into jump shots and cutting off his driving lanes. It worked. Miami won both games. Game 4 was truly the breaking point. LeBron dropped 35 points and held Rose to just 8 for 27 shooting in an 8-point Heat win. The truth was, Chicago's supporting cast was playing well enough to win in multiple games, but their star player wasn't scoring efficiently enough to finish the job. Yes, Rose was just 22. Yes, he was facing all-time greats. But if we're going to assume he would have become a top 10 or even top 20 player of all time without injuries, we also have to assume at some point he would have been able to take down this Miami team, or a LeBron team in general. And the reality was, nothing in this series suggested he was on a trajectory to do that. The Heat closed it out in 5 games, gentlemen sweeping the Bulls. Rose finished the series shooting just 35% from the field. In the finals, this same Heat team lost to Dallas in 6, a reminder of how far away the Bulls still were. Yes, Chicago was young and could improve, but Miami improved too, and the gap only seemed likely to grow. As the 2011 season ended, Chicago fans still had hope. What they didn't know was the real heartbreak was coming in 2012. Heading into the 2011-2012 season, the Bulls had the 3rd best odds to win the NBA championship. They were still young, had just won 62 games the year before, and seemed ready to take another step. This was a lockout-shortened season, just 66 games starting on Christmas Day, and Chicago opened with a statement. On national TV, they beat Kobe Bryant and the Lakers, 88-87, with Rose scoring 22 points on efficient shooting, including 4 threes. The message was clear. The Bulls were ready to make another run. Chicago started the season 16-3, with Rose putting up similar numbers to his MVP year. But there was one troubling difference. For the first time in his career, he was missing significant chunks of games with minor injuries. Rose had only missed 6 games total in his first 3 seasons. In the first half of 2012 alone, he missed 4 games in January with turf toe and another 5 in February with back spasm. Despite this, the Bulls kept winning. After 44 games, they were 35-9, and Rose was still on track to make first-team All-NBA. But in mid-March, things took another turn. A groin injury, followed by a foot injury, sidelined him for 12 straight games, from March 14th to April 5th. At this point in the season, LeBron James had already pulled far ahead in the MVP race. Rose was no longer in serious contention for a second straight award, but he was still one of the league's top guards and would have been on the All-NBA first team if he stayed healthy. Rose returned for the final 5 games of the regular season, but looked far from himself, averaging just 15.2 points on 32% shooting. Even so, the Bulls still finished with the best record in the East at 50-16. In games Rose played, they were 32-7. Without him, they were still very good, but with him, they were supposed to be a difficult out for anyone in the playoffs. In the first round of the playoffs, the Bulls were set to face the A-seeded Philadelphia 76ers. As is usually the case in a 1-8 matchup, Chicago was heavily favored. In Game 1, Rose looked sharp. He had 18 points heading into the fourth quarter, and the Bulls were in complete control, up by 13. Even with less than 1 minute 30 seconds left, Chicago still led by 12, and yet Tom Thibodeau kept Rose on the floor. That's when the unthinkable happened.
Looking to sweep you guys. You wanted us. You were crying out that you bypassed the harder team in Miami Heat.
Rose came down bad on his left foot. See him holding onto his knee and down.
Rose drove into the lane, landed awkwardly, and tore his ACL, the first major injury of his basketball career. It's easy in hindsight to say he shouldn't have been in the game, but the hard truth is, if it didn't happen then, it could have happened the next game, or the one after that. Rose's body had been breaking down all season. The ACL tear wasn't a freak accident. It was the devastating culmination of months of nagging injuries. With Rose out, the Bulls lost the series in 6 games. And as much as Chicago fans didn't want to admit it in the moment, this was the end of prime Derrick Rose. He would return to the court, but the player who once ruled the United Center was gone. Today, fans look back and reminisce about just how good prime Derrick Rose was. And make no mistake, he was a special talent, but we can't let the tragedy of his injuries cloud our judgment of what was actually likely to happen. Yes, Rose was the youngest MVP in league history, and he was on track to put together a Hall of Fame resume. But certain things were never guaranteed. Derrick Rose winning another MVP was unlikely. The next run of MVPs went to LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry, generational players who reached a level Rose would never touch, even at his peak. Winning a championship was also unlikely. In 2011, we saw the Bulls fall to the Miami Heat, the weakest of all of their big 3 teams. Those same Heat squads reached the finals the next 3 years, stronger and more experienced each time. Even with a fully healthy Rose, the Bulls, as constructed, didn't look like a team built to take them down. The Bulls' best realistic shot might have been in 2015. They faced LeBron's Cavaliers in the second round, with Rose averaging about 22 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists for the series. Maybe a fully healthy prime Rose would have been even better. Maybe they win that series. But then, they would have had to face a 60-win Atlanta Hawks team in the conference finals, and the 67-win Golden State Warriors, led by MVP Steph Curry, in the finals. That's a tall order, and after 2015, the road only got harder, with LeBron's Cavs winning in 2016, and the Warriors forming a dynasty after that. Another thing we have to note is the timing. The NBA was changing. The three-point era was here, and for a smaller guard without a reliable outside shot, that was a problem. Rose could dominate a game with his explosiveness, but he was never going to take over in the way Steph Curry could from behind the arc. With all these factors in play, I think the realistic ceiling for a fully healthy Rose was somewhere around the top 50 players of all time. Still insanely impressive, and a career we were robbed of seeing in full, but not near the level of true all-time greats like Jordan, LeBron, and Kobe, or even the next tier of legends, Giannis and Allen Iverson. The last thing I want to touch on is the player comparison we're seeing today. Whether people like it or not, Derrick Rose is closer to Ja Morant than you think. Let's look at Ja Morant's age 22 season. In 2021-22, he led the Grizzlies to 56 wins. Not quite the Bulls' 62 with Rose in 2011, but the Western Conference was deep, and Ja Morant missed a decent number of games that year. Statistically, Ja arguably had the better season: 27.4 points, 6.7 assists, and 5.7 rebounds on 49.3% shooting from the field. Compare that to Rose's 25 points, 7.7 assists, and 4.1 rebounds on 44.5% shooting, and Ja has the edge. To be fair, the modern NBA plays at a faster pace than the early 2010s, so let's level the playing field and look at their numbers per 100 possessions. A fairer comparison: Morant, 39.6 points, 9.7 assists, 8.2 rebounds. Rose, 35.6 points, 10.9 assists, 5.8 rebounds. Even here, Ja still has better stats. Now, in terms of playoff performance, Rose led the Bulls to the conference finals, while Ja's Grizzlies only reached the second round. But context matters. Morant got hurt against the Warriors and only played 3 games in that series. In those 3, he averaged 38.3 points, 6.7 rebounds, and 8.3 assists. Derrick Rose never had a 3-game playoff stretch with numbers like that. Yes, I'll again acknowledge the modern NBA spacing makes it easier to rack up big numbers. And I'll also acknowledge that Rose was the better defender. But the truth is, at age 22, these two were very similar in talent. And no one talks about Ja Morant like he's the next all-time great. So why do people look back at Derrick Rose and assume that's what he was destined to become? Here's the truth. Derrick Rose was a great young player who was incredibly marketable. He played in a big market in his hometown of Chicago, the same city where Michael Jordan built the most iconic legacy in basketball. The story was perfect. The highlights were unforgettable, and the ending was heartbreaking. That combination made people believe the ceiling was higher than it actually was. Derrick Rose was great, but greatness, the kind that lives forever, was never promised. But hey, that's just my take. I'm Derekknowsball, and as always, I'm just here to tell NBA stories from a different perspective.